This is a special recording. It is Monday, the 22nd of January 2018. The federal government has been without funding since midnight on Saturday night, so this is day 3. And the questions are already coming in here to the Georgia Society about what happens now that the government is not funded. How does this affect me from the IRS? So this is not going to be political. I am Art Auerbach, CPA.
Anson Asbury, JD, LLM.
So we're not going to get into the politics of this. We're not going to get into where the money's coming from, where it's going. This brief session is only to put you on notice as to how the government shutdown directly affects the Internal Revenue Service and how we operate. Now, this morning, believe it or not, on the 22nd of January, as I said, this is dated the 17th of January. It is called the IRS Fiscal Year 2018 Lapsed Appropriations Contingency Plan for the filing season. The reason we're doing this is bearing in mind that 1 week from today, the IRS announced that they were open to accept returns. That would be the 29th. Supposing nobody is there, what happens? And we'll have to go back because they're in 2013, which is the last time that we had a government shutdown. The IRS had a contingency plan, and they broke it down to several aspects of what happens. One is called activities otherwise authorized by law. And there were some opinions from the Attorney General and a previously filed bill that's called the Anti-Deficiency Act, believe it or not, that covers these items. Then there are activities necessary to safeguard human life or protect government property. And that's probably the one that you all are most interested in. And this thing goes on and on. And then there is letter C, which is a temporary provision. It's activities necessary for the orderly agency shutdown, and that is for the IRS. So what is the impact on IRS? First impact is going to be there is probably going to be nobody there to answer the phone.
Right.
So if you are thinking of calling up, put that out of your mind.
Right. Now, we'll say this. We're going to say over and over, nobody's there. In
Right.
fact, about 45% of the IRS is still there.
Right.
It's just there in places that you never actually get to reach out and contact them, right? All of the executive management in Washington, D.C. is reporting to work. Most of the local executive management's reporting to work. But you're not going to be able to meet or talk to your people on the ground. You're not going to be able to grab people on the taxpayer hotline. You're not going to be able to grab your revenue officer. You're not going to be able to grab your revenue agent, your appeals officer, your settlement officer, their managers. All of those field folks that we contact on a regular basis, they're being furloughed right now.
Okay. IRS, according to this report, as of the 17th, they have 80,565 employees. They're only going to allow on the workforce about 43.5% of them, roughly 35,000 employees. And they're compensated by some provisions other than the budget. They have other projects going. There are 973 employees that are going to be kept because of applications of law. And by the way, the U.S. Tax Court announced that they were open today and will continue to be open even though they may not have any funding. I don't know how they're doing
or until
funding runs out.
Until their funding runs out, because I think they have a reserve of funding. But again, that goes back to the point about there are people there to process things that happen by application of law, and we're going to get to that. What does that mean for you as a practitioner with clients who have issues where the application of law affects them?
Exactly. So, number one, you have payroll, you withhold payroll taxes, that's trust funds. There is no suspension from any of the timeframes to get that money into the government.
If you or your client is on weekly deposits, you're still on weekly deposits.
Absolutely.
Make those deposits.
If you are on an offer and compromise and you have a payment due, you are still obligated to make that payment on time.
If you're in an installment agreement and you have a payment due, you still need to make that payment.
Payment on time. Okay, now, if you have to file a return, so you're on a fiscal year, forget the current filing season for a moment. You're on a fiscal year, and I want to, by the way, one of the things to remind you all here, you realize that January 31 is the end of the extended time frame for people covered by the casualty loss law. So you have until the end of January to file that return, or now if you want to.
Or 10 days.
Or 10 days, yeah, within 10 days from now, basically, to get that return in. If you have money to pay, you must send that money with the return, and one under the necessity for the safety of human life or protection of government property aspect of this furlough. They are people there that will process returns that have money attached to them, and they will be depositing that on a timely basis. So please, I'm sure that there's somebody out there thinking about, great, I'll send them a check and it'll be outstanding until they show up again. No, it is going to get deposited as soon as they get that, because that is for the protection of government property. Right. Now, if you file a return and you are to get a refund, that may not happen until they come back to work. So
in other words, money coming in, they'll be processing. Money going out, maybe not so much.
Then they're retaining people in order to complete the current year tax forms. So as of right now, there is not a finalized version of the 2017 1040. They're waiting on Congress to decide what they're going to do with an extenders bill or a technical corrections bill, or both. And by the way, it occurs to me, if you're not familiar with the way Congress operates, it doesn't have to be a separate tax bill. Under the congressional rules, tax legislation can be attached to any revenue measure, which is why, if you were with us in the last recording and the recordings we just did, we talked about the budget, the Balanced Budget Act, which was not a tax bill, but it had a lot of tax provisions in it. So when they do this, whatever they're going to do to keep the government open, and I guess at noon today or somewhere around there, the Senate is supposed to vote again, and however long they're going to keep the government open, there may be some tax things in there or some exceptions to what we're saying. But they're retaining people in order to complete the tax forms, money to be deposited. And one of the other things that we'll talk about in this very brief discussion is what happens if I have a case pending, right, and I have outstanding time limits or time frames.
They don't change, right?
Okay.
So let's put it this way. Starting at the most important, tax court is staying open, okay, even if they run out of money and close. If you have a 90-day letter, a statutory notice of deficiency, or a final partnership administrative adjustments that needs to be filed within 90 days, you still need to file within 90 days, whether tax court is open or not, right? The tax court cannot extend that deadline for you. Only Congress can, and Congress hasn't done that.
And I might want to add here, from a practical point of view, you better get proof of the day you sent it, because there may not be somebody there to open it right away.
So this goes back to the post office is still open because the post office is self-funding. So if you are accustomed to filing petitions in tax court, as for example, and you use the Federal Express, you may not be able to have successful delivery if there's no one at the tax court. Now, I don't know what their internal rules are on essential personnel.
There has to be somebody there to sign for it.
If there will be a security guard, if they'll keep security on so somebody can sign for it. I don't know. Protect yourself, because if you file by certified mail, and you have the certified mail date. Your mail date is your filing date. It's timely filed is timely mailed. That rule doesn't necessarily apply for Federal Express if you don't have a positive receipt. So again, it's a nuanced thing, but safest way, if your policy has always been, oh, we FedEx it there, you might not necessarily be as safe as you think. You could fall through the cracks.
Right.
Same for a timely response to a final notice of federal tax, a notice of federal tax lien, a final notice of federal levy. Your 30 days to get into collection due process on that still runs on the 30 days. Even if your revenue officer that you've been in contact with is not working, you still need to meet that timeline. I would strongly suggest you do the same for information document requests if you're in examination. The last thing you want to do is sort of blow off your RA on an IDR response that's untimely. That one, there's more flexibility. A revenue agent has more discretion to allow you a waiver because they weren't available. But certainly with regards to liens, levies, tax court petitions, or anything else that has a firm deadline that prevents a collection action against you or the final assessment of tax, you need to file it as if everyone's open. And even if all it does is go into a mailbox that has a building stack of mail, you want to be able to prove that you sent it on time. I would say maybe don't fax it. Like if your practice has been faxing that to the RO for something like a final notice of lien or levy, it usually goes to their desktop, so on and so forth. Who knows how long this will last? They could have a stack of faxes there.
Or how long it's going to take them to get to it once they come back.
I would certainly suggest that you have some kind of documentation that you'd met your deadline, because those things aren't going to pass.
And by the way, of the 35,000 roughly employees that are going to continue to work, at least for right now, a good chunk of them are computer people, and they're there mostly for computer security and to keep the computer processing open. So if you electronically file a lot of this stuff, it will go through, or is supposed to go through the system in order to have that work. And then, of course, if we're looking at this, there's also building security. Obviously, they're going to be doing that as well. And so don't think that the 35,000 employees, they're not, a whole lot of them are collection agents or examination agents. They're not. They're there to keep the agency on life support, if you will.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to find an RA, you're not going to find an RO, you're not going to find a revenue agent, a revenue officer, a settlement officer, an appeals officer, an appeals manager, a examination manager, right? You're not going to find any of those folks right now. So if you have some problem or you want an extension, don't expect to be able to get it. I would strongly suggest against placing the request for an extension during this time period. In other words, if you're pressed for it, just get it out, find a way, even if you need to go down to Hapeville.
Or amend it later.
Right, well, go down to Hapeville and get to that post office that doesn't close until midnight and get it out that day, as opposed to sort of banking on the extension. Because again, you just don't know. Those deadlines are still in place. They don't change because the government has closed.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of us doing this, which is going to be put up on the Georgia Society website so that anybody who wants to can look at it. We're also going to be, as soon as I'm done here, going to be doing an article which we're going to get out rather quickly to try to reach as many of the members as we can as to what happens during the shutdown or the government furloughing their people. I cannot speak, by the way, to what's going to happen at the Department of Labor if you have 5500s or anything related to retirement plans or fringe benefit plans that are administered by DOL. I have no idea what's going on there. I don't think Anson does either.
I don't have visibility of that. But
only for the Internal Revenue Service, and that's the reason we're doing this. And the main deal is, because we've already gotten questions, What happens if I have a return due? And by the way, the IRS has already announced, I heard it on the radio this morning, coming here to the Georgia Society to do this recording. If the deal was, if you filed on the 29th and there was no payment, but you were due a refund, please remember, if you were claiming the earned income tax credit, the earliest that refund would have been paid under the old method was February 15th. That was already mandated in the statute. They have now said that a result of this shutdown, that's going to be pushed off until the 29th of February. Right. So if you've got anybody who is really counting on that refund happening very quickly, there's going to be a delay in getting that processed.
So I think that means that, I think the math there is 2 weekend days of the government being closed equals 2 weeks of delay in your refund. So if we're closed until Friday, you might not see that earned income tax refund until March, no, May even, who knows?
Who knows?
But again, if 2 weekend days equal 2 weeks of delay, and that's how they're looking at it, expect refunds to be substantially
Yeah, and I would pay attention to what Anson said. You know, some of the extensions now are automatic. You don't have to file anything in order to get the extension. But particularly the ones that require a filing, please do something to document the timeliness of the extension request.
Right, absolutely. So again, you know, this is the time, if you've always been sort of, if you've never been terribly formal about certified mail and return receipt cards and things like that, and using the Postal Service as the means of delivery, now is a good time to do that, because that is the one means of delivery that is almost always ironclad in the face of an IRS dispute as to when you did it. So as long as you've got that documentation that you had sent it out on the right day, you'll be good as far as anything that goes paper. And again, the same with the computerized filings. If you're in TPS and you are making deposits for your payroll or making any other kind of federal deposits, there's somebody there at the other end to receive that deposit. So make that electronic filing, make it on time. It's not as if they've turned off. And get a printout. Yeah, it's not as if they've turned off the computers.
Now, that is all we have to say, because obviously we have gone through Saturday, Sunday, and we're doing this at about noon on Monday. So there may be subsequent developments after this. So please stay tuned on the Georgia Society website.
Yep, I imagine there will be a link for the article that Art's putting together on the front of the website as soon as that's pulled together. Hopefully the shutdown won't last too long.
Thank you.